Hello everyone, Chris Smith here, and today I'm going to show you a sort of brief tutorial on how to use Adobe Lightroom CC. There's a lot of earlier versions of it, but they all work relatively the same. Some few changes here and there, but pretty much the same. I already have my photo imported. I'm going to kind of skip all that beginning stuff and assume that you kind of know how to at least get it imported. There's kind of a lot to go into. You can do a lot with Lightroom. Really spice up your photos. We're going to be kind of messing with just the settings in this main panel to the right. You know, we have some other stuff up here, and I may get into those a little bit. Maybe I'll do a separate video that kind of goes into the specifics of some of those things, but for the most part, we're just going to be messing with the basic stuff. Color correction, you know, maybe some exposure stuff, and cropping, and rotations, and maybe some split toning. But I'm just going to try and keep this brief, and I'm just going to go right into it. So right here, I've got this photo of the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco. Pretty cool photo. We had to hike down like 40 minutes with all my gear just to even get to this spot, and I snapped off a few photos, and this was one of them that I liked, but it needs a little bit of work. So the first thing that I'm going to do is you can tell that it's a little crooked. You know, so the horizon's a little higher on the left than the right. So I'm just going to go up to this right here, which is our crop and straighten tool. I'm just going to kind of rotate it until it looks like it's about even. You can see they give you this grid here, and you can kind of line it up with this kind of line right here. You want to sort of line that up with the horizon until it looks okay, and press enter to confirm that crop. I just like working with kind of just the level image. I'm OCD, so it'll drive me crazy if I'm looking at that crooked image while I'm editing. The second thing I do is I just bring down my highlights a little bit and bring up my shadows. Now, I shot this on a preset on my camera called CineStyle Technicolor, and it's basically a much flatter profile, and it allows you to sort of get more details out of your highlights and your shadows in the first place. But I'm going to do that a little more here with my highlights and shadows, and just kind of flatten it out even more than it already is. Exposure here obviously changes the exposure. Left makes it more dark, right a little brighter. Command Z, of course, to redo your last changes. And note that at any time you can press the backslash key and see your original image. And this helps with kind of like any changes you make with the contrast and stuff. You just kind of hold it down and just check and see, and it helps you compare your original image to what you're working with at the moment. So next thing I'm going to do is bring up my contrast a little bit. Since I shot this in a flatter profile, I'm going to need to add that contrast back in myself. And we can use our histogram here and notice that a lot of the color and light is on the left side of the histogram. This is suitable in some conditions where it's like a silhouette shot and most of the image is dark, but I want this to be pretty evenly exposed, so we're going to need for this spike to be more in the middle. And so we're just going to bring up our exposure a little bit to maybe say there. And we can even bring up our whites a little bit to help even that out a little bit. And you can see the waves start to pop a little more. But I am going to bring down my blacks a little bit, and that helps with bringing in a little more contrast, bringing up the whites and bringing down the blacks. It's almost the same as kind of changing the contrast here. That looks pretty good. I could maybe make it just a tad brighter. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do, sometimes I mess with the temperature and the tint on this one, so you can see if I bring it to the right, it makes it a little warmer, a little bluer, and maybe I'll just bring it up a little bit just to show you. So it was here at 5,150. I'll just bring it up a little more to maybe just make it a tiny bit warmer. The tint, I'm just going to leave the tint as is for now. The next thing that I normally do is I bring up the clarity just a little bit. Sometimes, depending on type of photo it is, I'll bring it up a little more. But what the clarity does essentially is brings up detail in all of the mid-tones. So if you have like rocks and stuff, you're going to see a lot more detail in the rocks and, you know, some of these other high contrast areas in the mid-tones here. You're going to see a little more detail. If you bring it all the way up, maybe I can show you kind of what the difference is. Some people think it's a lot like sharpening. It's really not. It's just a different type of way to get detail out of your shot. But I'll leave it somewhere in here. That looks all right to me. This is all preference based. I'm in After the clarity, and you can see here you've got some other options with this. You can bring out sort of the vibrance, which is bringing out saturation in the midtones. Bring up your overall saturation. Tone curve, sometimes I'll use this. It just basically is another way to control your exposure. I'm going to skip over that for now. And a lot of times I do go into this though, your HSL color and black and white panel over here. And I'll kind of go over these as quick as I can. Basically, this is, if you go over to the hue right here, it gives you the option to change the color of certain colors in your picture. So if I want my blues to be more green, I can do that. Kind of a cool way to change color of colors in your image. I can make the reds more orange, and you can look at the bridge and it gets more orange. I normally don't mess with the hues that much. I leave the hues as is for the most part, but I do go into my saturation tab here within this panel, and I'm just going to bring out the colors that I think should pop. So the saturation as opposed to the hue doesn't change colors from one to another, it just increases the saturation of that color in the image, and that's everything red. So mostly just the bridge here, maybe a little bit in the rocks. If I bring up this red, we're going to see the bridge start to pop just a little more. It's already very red as is, but when you bring that up, it's going to pop a little more. I also am going to bring out the blues a little more. When I bring up this thing here, our blues get a lot stronger. You don't want to go too much because see, it starts to look gross after a minute, but maybe just a little bit more. And we'll press the backslash key and just see kind of how our changes are looking now. So already looking a lot better, I think. Colors are popping better. Exposure is more balanced. So I might bring up the greens as well in that mountain and see if I can maybe get those to kind of come out a little more. And also maybe some oranges. Since we made this a little warmer in the first place, maybe we can get it a little more warmth out of it. Just by bringing up those yellows and those oranges. Split toning allows you to basically control the hue and saturation of the highlights and the shadows separately, as opposed to going up here and changing the overall warmth and tint of the image. With split toning, we can control the shadows and the highlights separately. Maybe if I hadn't have messed with this warmth, with the temperature up here, I would have kind of went into the split toning a little more, but since I've already kind of got my overall temperature that I'm going for, I'm just going to leave the split toning alone. Sometimes I even though I've added that clarity in already, I bring up my sharpening just a little bit, just in case there's any out of focus areas. It might kind of just sharpen those up a little bit. For the most part, this was well in focus, so. But we'll bring that up a little bit, and I don't really mess with any of these down here. You can see here it's got certain part of the image magnified. You can click this thing and looks like a target and just sort of move around and kind of check out some of your picture. While we have this magnified like this, I want to show you this little spot right here. There's sometimes just a little bit of dust on your lens. Maybe I had forgot to sort of wipe it off a little bit, but there's this little, and there's a big one over here. You can kind of see it there in the magnification. I'm going to show you also how to get rid of those in this tutorial. But I'm just going to kind of go down the line and first just kind of finish up some of these settings down here. So every time you bring up your sharpening, I sometimes reduce the noise just a little bit, just because when you do sharpen something up, you might get a little more noise in there. Then I come down, and a lot of times I like to add this vignette. I'll make it like a little darker on the edges, but before I do that, Command Z to redo that, and again, anytime, backslash, check out our image now compared to the original. Before I do my vignette, I'm going to show you how to kind of get rid of some of these little spots here. So basically, there's something up here called the spot removal tool, and you're just going to click that, and you're going to get this little circular target type looking thing. This one I can definitely see pretty well here, so I'm just going to basically show you how this works. You essentially click on it and identify that that is the part that you're trying to remove. A second circle will come up and you'll say, I want to replace the section I clicked with this. And you know, it's in the clouds and there's some other clouds going on here, so I can just take a piece of that cloud that doesn't have a spot on it and after I do that, you just press enter, and you can see that it's made this little circle here, and that's signifying that we've covered up that spot. Of course, this circle, this outline will not be in the final image, but it's just notifying you that it kind of pasted over that. So I'm going to do that a couple more times. I can see a couple more spots here. Let's get rid of this one. Yeah, apparently I forgot to wipe off my lens. So you can see just a couple in here. There's a good one here. And that looks pretty good. And I've got this one big one over here on the left side. So we're gonna increase the size of our spot brush and hit this with a little bit of that. Press enter, and now that bigger sort of dark spot is gone now too. So now that we have all those spots removed, one of the last things I guess I'm going to do is bring up my vignette just a tiny bit. I just think it looks a little cooler with a little bit of vignette on it. If you go to the right, it'll add sort of a wider vignette. Some people do that with like portraits and stuff, but I would just like to add maybe a little bit, not too much. I think if you just do it a very subtle amount, it adds a nice little touch to the photo. But yeah, that's basically it. I'm not going to do much more to this photo. I just want to give you guys sort of a basic overview on how some of these settings work. It's pretty simple conceptually, you know, just like moving bars back and forth. Leave a thumbs up if you liked it, if you learned something from it. Comment down below if you have any requests for other tutorial videos like this one that I should do. Maybe the next couple weeks I'll kind of go into some of these other tools up here in a little more depth. This is more of just sort of a basic video, but anyways, subscribe to my channel for more tutorials on photo and video shooting and editing. I've got tutorials coming every week. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this one. I'll see you next time.